Good morning, everybody out there in internet land, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from. Welcome back to Hot Mess Life Coach, Season 2, Episode 11. I am your host, Brian Hogan, both a hot mess and a life coach, because yes, that too is allowed. And this is the show for people trying to get it together while the world seems to be falling apart. Today, what I want to talk about is when tapping out is totally right. When it's just the right thing to do to tap out, to say sayonara to the stress, to give it all up, to quit, to give in, to let it go. Because our culture teaches us that we should never quit, that quitters never win, and that we should never tap out, that we should push through, that we should push hard, that we should go for the gold. But actually, if you look around, we're the most sick society in decades. Chronic stress, chronic fatigue, chronic illness are all skyrocketing. And now in the post-pandemic world, depression and anxiety are skyrocketing too. So there are times in life when tapping out is exactly and totally the right thing to do. I'm currently studying two martial arts, Hapkido and Taekwondo. They're different. Hapkido is all about blending the energy of your attacker, so it's compassion-based. And Taekwondo in Korean stands for the art of kicking and punching. So it's very much attack-based. But both of them are rough. They both can be, pretty strenuous on the body. I come home with bruises in strange places at least once a week. For 2 weeks, I had these bruises all up and down my arms from doing defense moves. Then I had bruises on my ankles from doing kick moves. Then I have bruises on my side sometimes from all the falling and tumbling and rolling that we do. It sounds awful, but it's actually not. It's a pretty great feeling because there's this sense of like pushing myself to the brink, of pushing myself to this edge that I didn't think I could push past, and then thriving there and breaking the barrier of my own thinking and the barrier of my own physicality, and thus improving. But there is a delicate balance in this dance of pushing ourselves to learn and grow and pushing ourselves too far. And it is important that we learn to find that line. If you push too far, you will tear a tendon or pull a muscle. If you don't push far enough, you will plateau and you won't grow. So in the martial arts classes, when we're practicing moves, we have this safety mechanism in place to tell our partner when we've reached that line between pushing ourselves to grow and pushing ourselves too far. It's called tapping out. We literally tap on ourselves just like this. Like someone, I've done an attack and they're twisting my wrist, and when it's too much, I on myself, I don't hit them. You tap yourself with your free hand, you tap. And they stop. They stop because you've tapped out. Sometimes we have to tap out. I look at things with our wrists in that class, or with falling, or with tumbles, or with jumping. And if we push too far, we're actually going to set ourselves way back with an injury. So the tricky thing is that culture encourages us to push too far in every arena. In business, pushing too far leads to heart attacks and strokes. In academia, it leads to burnout and dropping out. In mental health, it leads to depression and anxiety. In emotional health, it leads to resentment, codependency, and boundary violations. And on the cycle goes. So we do need to learn when to push and when to tap out. There's something research has discovered that like the ideal conditions for human learning are when you're just beyond your comfort zone, but it's not too overwhelmingly hard. So you don't want to be doing something that's easy, because ultimately when it's too easy, you'll become bored and you'll become disengaged. And then again, you won't grow because it's easy. It's too easy. You've mastered that already. Like we've all mastered walking. So sometimes walking is like, okay, I'm not really practicing. Like we can enjoy walks. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm using it as an example. Like kids who are learning how to walk, they're absorbed in the task of learning how to walk because they want it so badly, because they've seen everyone around them be able to walk. And it is the curiosity about how to make walking work and pushing themselves past the edge of where their legs will take them that makes them eventually learn to walk. That same mechanism of learning and curiosity and wonder and fascination is what drives us as adults. And so you want to find the balance between pushing too far and not pushing far enough, because when something is too easy, you get bored, you get disengaged, you lose interest. When something is too hard, you get overwhelmed, you go into freeze mode, you stop, you want to give up. So there's this sort of sweet spot with learning, with going, with pushing, with improving, where you want to push past your comfort zone, but not so far past that you move into overwhelm. That's exactly what happens in martial arts class. I push past the comfort zone of where my wrist wants to go, and then I tap. And then next time, my wrist can go a little farther, and then I tap. And then next time, almost all the way around, and then I tap. And now my wrist is way more flexible than it was when I started in martial arts class, so that on the street, in a brawl, someone can twist my wrist and it's going to take a lot longer for it to hurt, which gives me a chance to then do a move and get out of it and use the energy of the attacker to subdue them or to get free. So tapping out is key, but pushing into the discomfort is key too. Pushing into it, but just a little bit into the discomfort. If you go too far into the discomfort, which is what culture teaches us to do, then you become overwhelmed and you either become resentful or you become sick or you become depressed or you become dysfunctional. Keep that as we go through this. There's also another meaning to the phrase tapped out, which I want to talk to you about, which is when you're tapped out in our colloquial, it means you're exhausted or you're broke or you're otherwise fully depleted of your energy and reserves or capacity to give, to be present, or to accomplish, well, anything. So when you're feeling tapped out, it is necessary to tap out. There's this thing in the research called compassion fatigue and burnout. I'm sure you've heard burnout. Some of you have probably heard of compassion fatigue too, because if you're like me, you like to help other people. And so you have a wellspring of compassion in you. And I know that's the tribe that we're cultivating here, is people who want to facilitate the transformation of human consciousness that we're all undergoing. And so compassion fatigue can rear its tired little head at times. Compassion fatigue in the research is basically a form of stress or tension rises from frequent contact with traumatized people, where we become preoccupied with the suffering and pain of others. And I mean, here's the thing. Everyone you interact with is a traumatized person. And so if you care at all about other people, about the people in your life, even if it's not strange, you don't have to be in the helping professions like I am. You could just be a person who cares about your sister, who cares about your cousin, who cares about your loved ones, who cares about your friends, who cares about your pets. If you're a person who cares about the experience and lives of the beings around you, then you are in frequent contact with traumatized people or traumatized beings, and it's easy to become preoccupied with the suffering and pain of those others. That leads to compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is a problem that can sort of undermine a person's mental and physical health, and it can negatively affect their relationships and their ability to care for others. Compassion fatigue has this whole range of symptoms and ways it can show up. I'm just going to list off a few for you. Compassion fatigue can show itself as a diminished ability or interest to care for others, which then doesn't feel good to us because naturally we want to care, we want to be compassionate. It can show up as a preoccupation with the people you help, like becoming fixated on them as if you're their rescuer or their savior, which is also out of balance because we have to understand while we want to help people, everyone's journey is their own journey, and the outcome of their journey is their journey. I've said this to some clients recently, and I like to remind myself of this all the time too. Adults are capable of being disappointed. So do what you can to help. Help as much as feels right to your soul. But any sort of preoccupation with the help you give, with the outcome it's going to lead to, is you in someone else's business. We have to mind our own business and let them mind their own business. And the outcomes of people's lives are our own business. Adults are capable of being disappointed, and we can't save or rescue everybody. Another symptom of compassion fatigue is mental or physical exhaustion, anger and irritability, anxiety and depression, intrusive thinking, sleep problems, being easily startled even can be a symptom of this. Hopelessness about the helping work that we try to do or about the love that we try to give. Sometimes even flashbacks. Sometimes hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is like sort of overdoing it and adding this sense of urgency to everything they do. avoidance of certain activities, situations, or people that you help because you're overwhelmed by their issues or problems, feeling like a failure as a helper, losing your productivity, emotional numbness. All of this can result from compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue comes from not knowing when we're tapped out, and so not knowing that we should tap out. We can have trouble separating our personal and professional lives. We can have a decreased capacity to sympathy and empathy, which then doesn't feel right to our true soul, because by our very nature, humans, for the most part, unless you're a psychopath, want to experience sympathy and empathy. Dysfunctional coping behaviors, that's like misusing alcohol or drugs. For me, it was sugar. I think I told you all about my shame eating of cinnamon rolls back in 2022. Even reduced decision-making ability, feeling disconnected from those that we love and care about, decreased satisfaction or enjoyment from the work we do that we normally love. All of this is a result of compassion fatigue. And so sometimes in the scientific literature, the research literature, we have these two terms, compassion fatigue and empathy fatigue, and they're occasionally used interchangeably, but they are slightly different. And the idea here, according to a researcher named Figley, is that without the ability to empathize, there is little room for compassion fatigue to happen, because empathy is essential in helping work and experiencing the strains of caring. So what that means is that if you're an empath, people like us who watch this kind of program, who like to do this kind of work, who see the transformation of human consciousness occurring on Earth and want to be a part of it, we're empaths. We have empathy. And so empathic concern is our impetus to help those people who are suffering, like reaching out, like when you see a wounded puppy on the side of the road and you're like, oh my God, that's empathy. And we want to provide whatever we can. In my case, it's my services as a life coach, and eventually it'll be my service as a mental health counselor, but it's also my service as an uncle, my service as a brother, my service as a friend. And that's the same for all of us. So, our empathic response toward the people we try to help is how we try to remedy suffering. And it leads us to sort of share in the emotional response of the person who's suffering. Compassion stress is the consequence of this empathic responding, and it represents the ongoing desire to reduce the suffering of the people we love. So it comes from a beautiful place. We want to reduce the suffering of the people we love, but we can end up with compassion fatigue, which has that whole host of symptoms that come with it from before. So tapping out doesn't mean you stop helping or you stop caring. It means you stop pushing past your capacity to be useful and past what your true nature really wants to do because of some culturally prescribed prescription to help at all costs. All costs. Sometimes there are too many costs. We never want to do anything at all costs, or we end up broke and we end up tapped out. So there's also another sort of concept I want to cover, which is burnout, which is slightly different than compassion fatigue. Burnout and secondary traumatic stress, those are two separate components of compassion fatigue, but they're a little bit different from there. So when we're stressed out for a really long time, we can reach this sort of state of physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. This state, that's burnout. Burnout may have a range of causes, and it does not happen specifically after being exposed to another person's trauma. It happens over a long period of time of abandoning ourselves, violating our boundaries, and pushing too hard, pushing past our discomfort over and over and over again because of some cultural belief or some sense of duty, and then we end up burned out. In contrast, secondary trauma stress occurs when we're unable to save someone from their suffering and we become distressed and preoccupied with their pain in that moment. So the symptoms of secondary traumatic stress can look very similar to post-traumatic stress. Burnout builds up and takes hold gradually, whereas the experience of secondary traumatic stress is typically fast. But it can contribute to the experience of burnout because secondary stress is another thing that can lead to burnout. So we have all of these components now. We have secondary stress from witnessing other people's trauma, which is something we do in work that we do. And then we have burnout, which is pushing ourselves too hard, which is something culture encourages us to do. Workaholics are looked at as like, yeah, you go get them. But actually, they're they're tapping out in their early 60s because it all became too much. And we're seeing that more and more and more in culture today, where the sort of workaholic culture is breaking down. It is not working. We need to go back to a oneness, a unity, a peace, a rest, and a calm in order to thrive. So I want to share an exercise. I like to call it the tapping out. And you can do this to figure out where in your schedule or where in your to-do list you should maybe tap out. So step one, this is to do a calming practice to move into your body, like deep breathing or some kind of a body scan. The reason it's important to do a calming practice first, an embodiment practice to move out of our head into our body, is because our body is the wisest part of us. And when we're calm and peaceful and restful, there's all kinds of physiological responses that happen that make us better decision makers. In a book called How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LePera, she's the holistic psychologist. She reminds us about, when we get into the calm state, like our muscles in our face relax, our muscles in our ears relax, so we can actually hear better. Our muscles in our throat relax, so we can communicate better. Like there's literally physiological things that happen when we calm down, where our blood flow and our hormones are channeled away from the fight or flight stress response, relax, rest, and digest response. And when we're in that more rested place, that more peaceful place, we have all of our resources back to do higher executive functioning, like decision making or planning for the future or determining what's right for us. So moving out of our anxious brain and out of our sympathetic nervous system response, our fight or flight response, which is what a lot of us are in chronically day to day, we can move into our body. We can move into our rest and digest response. And the body processes 11 billion bits of information per second, whereas the brain processes 40 bits of information per second. So we're talking about 40 versus 11 billion. That's a huge difference. So when you move into the rest and digest process, you're freeing up 10,999,999,060 bits of information more than what you had in your anxiety brain that you can now use to determine where and when you should tap out. So do a calming practice. Get into your body. Even if it's just taking 3 to 5 slow, deep breaths or a body scan. A body scan means you sit with your eyes closed in a comfortable chair, or you can lay on the floor and you the muscles in your feet and you relax them consciously, and then your ankles, and then your calves, and then your knees, and so on, all the way up your body. So a body scan will bring you into your body. Deep breathing will often bring you into your body. There's all kinds of practices like that, but anything that works for you to calm down. And once you're calm, you do step two. And it's really important to get calm first. Calm is the gateway into all wisdom, because it's the gateway into our body, which is where all the wisdom is. So step two, look at your to-do list or calendar and look which items on it cause you the most stress or anxiety. Perhaps you have this block of time on, like daily, from Monday through Friday, where you have to go to work, and perhaps you hate your job, but you don't feel like you can quit your job because you're 5 years away from retirement, or because you don't think you're qualified to do anything else. But you hate your job, so it's causing you stress and anxiety. Perhaps you take dance lessons, but you're not really sure they bring you joy anymore, or the studio is too far from your house at that time of day. Perhaps you say yes too often to obligations and commitments with friends and colleagues, and now just seeing those things on your calendar fills you with it. No judgment here. I am a recovering people pleaser. 2 years sober tops, and so I get it. Like, we're all yes men, we're yes women, we're yes people, and it's cultural to say yes all the time and to overextend ourselves. But let's be artists. Let's be countercultural. Let's be part of the counterculture. Buck the system, buck the trend, trailblaze a new, where the rest and digest cycle reigns and the fight or flight cycle crawls away and dies. That's useful, sure, if you're being attacked by a bear or you're being mugged in an alleyway. But if you're not being attacked by a bear or mugged in an alleyway, how about we hang out in the rest and digest cycle instead? The one that's evolutionarily makes more sense for us. And so there's all things. You look at your calendar. Step two, you determine what thing is bringing you dread. There's probably a bunch of things, and that's okay too. So once you locate an anxiety inducing item and you want to take these one at a time, you move into step three. So step three is choose an anxiety inducing item from your to do list and close your eyes. Remember, you're calm bodied at this point. So you're in the embodied place. You've looked at your calendar. It might have stressed you out to look at your calendar. So that's okay. Just do a little bit more deep breathing again. And then move on to step three, trying to remain calm and peaceful and in the rest and digest cycle, the rest and digest nervous system response as you do these steps. So step three, imagine what it would be like if that item was not on your schedule. And I don't mean imagine what it would be like to cancel it. I don't mean imagine what it would be like to quit your job or postpone something. I just mean pretend there was no fallout for a moment. And imagine the item gone from your schedule, that it just wasn't there, that you never committed to it in the first place, that it isn't part of your life, that you don't have to do it. No dance lessons, no job you hate, no social obligation that you regret making. When you're in that imagined place, calmly, a fallout free zone, because it's our imagination, so it's a fantasy world, take stock of what you feel in your body. Do you notice a lightening, a widening, an unclenching, an unfurrowing, an electricity, an excitement? What do you notice? If you're noticing dread or anxiety or a feeling of fear, you might still be trying to take the thing off your schedule and you're actually getting caught up in imagining the fallout. So take another deep breath, go back and try it again, pretending there's no fallout and you're just taking the anxiety inducing item away, as if you had something you hate on your dinner plate when you were a kid and it just got taken away and you no longer had to eat it. There was no fallout, it just got taken away. The dog got it. Boom, gone. So now your plate has no anxiety inducing item on it and there's no fallout. How would you feel then? When you get to that feeling, take stock of what you notice. Do you feel a sense of freedom and peace coming in? If you do, that's a sign that those areas of your life might need reevaluating. This can be scary, and that's okay. Fear you will always have with you. Fear doesn't mean you're not on the right track. It's dread. It's a feeling of being trapped and stuck. That means you're not on the right track. Fear can be a precursor to excitement, and fear might actually mean you're on to something. So if you start noticing that sense of peace and freedom when you remove an anxiety-inducing item from your schedule, that might mean it's time to think about how you can tap out, how you can quit, how you can remove, how you can cancel. So step four, adjust what you can adjust on your to-do list or your schedule. If something cannot be adjusted, or you think it cannot be adjusted, then sit with it, contemplate it. Is it true in reality that it can't be adjusted? Or is it a fear of change holding you back? Or your own belief system holding you back? One thing I've come to know fully in my journey towards my own awakening is that when something makes us feel free, it is usually a good idea to follow it. And when something makes us feel trapped or a feeling of dread, it is often something in need of some kind of adjustment or just to be out of altogether. That may feel impossible. That may feel scary. You may even feel angry at me for saying that because you're like, this thing can't be tapped out. I'm the breadwinner. Rah! And maybe it can't be tapped out immediately. That might be true. But it doesn't mean you can't come home from work at the end of the day once or twice a week and spend 15 minutes on the job boards, just looking around at what might pique your interest. Nothing changes without action on our part, but the action doesn't have to be big, crazy action. It can be small, little baby turtle steps. The first step might not be quitting your job that's 5 years away from retirement and blowing your pension to smithereens. That might not be one. Step one might be, I'm going to sign up for an Indeed account. Step one might be, I'm going to dust off my resume from 5 years ago and take a look at it. That might be all that's required in step one. But if you just keep following the thread of your freedom and taking the steps that feel more free and more exciting, it may eventually lead you to the big adjustment where the job you hate is gone or the social obligations are gone and something else is there in its place. and it will seem like it happened overnight. In fact, it was turtle step after turtle step, baby step after baby step that brought you to your new place. So just think about what baby steps you might be able to take if this imagination exercise led you at first to a place of freedom before it led you to a place of fear. I heard this analogy the other day about a garden. And so plant all of these seeds in the garden. And if the very next day they didn't all sprout and become vegetables, we wouldn't run over to our garden and stomp it all out in frustration. We know intuitively that it takes time for them to grow. So each seed you plant is a little step you take. And here's the thing, the garden, when it sprouts up, it all starts to come in around them. So everything starts to come in together. So when one good thing happens, another good thing happens, and then here comes the fruits, here comes the apples, here comes the berries, here comes the string beans. So because it's the season of blooming. So right now you might just be in a season of contemplating. That's like the winter. You might be in a season of planting. That's like taking the baby steps. That's the spring. Or you might be in a season of watering and nurturing. That's taking more baby steps. That's the summer. Or you might be in a season of harvesting. That's like, I quit. I'm canceling. That's the harvest. That's the fall. That's fine. All seasons are needed. All of them. So it doesn't matter which season you're in, but know which season you're in and behave accordingly. If you're in the winter and all you can do right now is think about the changes and imagine the changes, then hang out in steps 1 through 3 of this exercise and keep contemplating, imagining what it might be like to have a schedule that's more freeing, to have a to-do list that's dreadful. And then eventually you'll move into the spring and you'll start taking steps toward that new, empowering, right life. In martial arts, when we tap out, the opposing force releases their hold on us. In life, tapping out can be a kind of release too, one that can lead you to peace, freedom, and joy. If you are brave enough to quit. My life coach and mentor, Martha Beck, once said to me, why put off until tomorrow what you can cancel? And that has become a bit of a mantra of sorts for me because I am canceling things left and right now. Like, as a recovering people pleaser, I still sometimes find myself making too many commitments that are beyond the scope of my bandwidth because of the dread of disappointing people. And it is dreadful. Like, please don't be disappointed in me. But that's really just a trauma response triggered by my childhood wounding of an insecure attachment style, because disappointing people means I might be abandoned altogether in my trauma brain. That's what it means to me. But when I take deep breaths, when I go into my body, when I access my true nature and I tune back into my heart, my true desires, I always notice when it is my social mask saying yes, even when my true nature would rather say, God, no. So I cancel stuff now if I have to, because I am training myself to honor my true nature, not to self-abandon anymore out of fear of social reprisal. I'm training myself to tap out when I've had enough, and you can tap out too. So that's what I have for you. Thank you all today for tuning in. Thank you so much. I can't wait to hear what you all quit about. If you're deciding to quit something today, leave it in the comments below. If you're struggling with something to tap out on, leave that in the comments below and let's talk about it. In the meantime, I thank you all for tuning in from the future, from the past, from right now live. I'm so happy about having all of you here with me. And anyone who might benefit from what you heard here today, please feel free to share this video, tag them in the post, like it, tweet it, link it. And if you want to learn more about me and what I do, you can visit me at thebrianhogan.com for more information or to apply for coaching. See you all next week for episode 12 on Thursday, March 23rd at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, be hot, be messy, and be blessed. Much love. Thank you.